Hi, welcome to Diving into Deep Waters. I am your host, Erin Rowling. And have you ever thought, man, God sure does have a sense of humor? Probably. I think we all have that feeling about God sometimes. But if you remember from last week's podcast, I talked about counting your blessings and all these things. And I mentioned in there if I could have a redo day of the day, the like terrible day that I had, I would take it. Well, God was like, okay, girl, let's try that. Let's see what happens. He gave me a redo day. This is not good to not be able to talk when you're just starting off on a podcast and you got a little ways to go. We got this. We got this. So I'll tell you the story. So I, I don't know. I have to just chuckle about it just because God's so funny. But I set many alarms, as many of you know, because I got to do my whole snooze thing. And the day before had been really, really busy. I don't know if I was just extremely tired. I don't know because I don't think I've slept through an alarm in a very long time. I don't remember the last time that happened. So anyways, I I slept through all three of my alarms and Paul wakes me up, which after a lot of years of marriage, he's learned a lot. And I tell you that all the time. Like, he's really learned this, he's really learned that. But I would say, probably in this one area, maybe not has learned as much. That I am like a sleeping bear, I feel like, because when you wake me up, I just cannot grasp things quickly. I am startled. I'm one of those people that, like, my kids used to say, my girls when they were teenagers, like, we never would wake up mom because she's like, what? And like scare them, actually. That's how I wake up. I'm not like this, oh, it's, I woke up. Okay, kind of thing. I'm like, what? you know? And so he came in and he was like, Aaron. And I mean, that's how it felt. Maybe he said it nicely. I don't know. But he didn't like, if I wake up my kids or something, I like, crawl in bed with them and I'm like stroking them and I'm like, hey, you need to wake up. And I'm not like, Amanda or Paul. I'm like nice about it. And him, not so much. Because all I hear is Aaron. And I'm like, oh, what? And he's like, Abby has to leave in 5 minutes and she said you need to pack her lunch. And I was like, what? The Wait a second, what happened? And my alarms were set. Like, I did not hear them. And I don't know how long it has to go before it won't like make the sound anymore. But I surpassed the limit of the sound. And so, of course, I got up, like, jump out of bed, got 5 minutes to make her lunch, throw a bunch of stuff in there, send her on her way. And I thought to myself, because when you wake up late or something like that happens, that's just like not how you want to start your day, especially if you're a person of like, you're a creature of habit, which I am. Like, I could eat the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I have my routine pretty much throughout my day. And so to have something like happen and start off that way, and as they rushed out the door to go to school and everything, I thought to myself, wait a second. God is giving you a redo. And this is your opportunity to kind of like chill and just say, okay, this is how the day has started, but you did wake up. You were able to make her lunch. Count my little blessings. Just because this is how your day started does not mean how this is how the rest of the day is going to start. Like, go make your coffee, start doing your routine. It's perfectly fine. And so I did. I just took in a deep breath. I just was like, Lord, thank you for this beautiful day. Because I love to do that when I wake up and I set my 3 alarms. Like, the first alarm, I usually fall back asleep, but usually the second alarm, I try to just start to say, thank you, Lord, for this day. And maybe I didn't get to do it in bed like I normally do, but I could still do it. And God is so funny and so gracious and so kind. And Like, let's see what she's gonna do. She said she would take a redo and she would do it differently, and he gave me the opportunity, and I think I passed. I think I did all right. Not saying that if that happened again this week, that I would pass, but you gotta take your wins where you can get them because sometimes you fail miserably, but you gotta take those little wins. And it was kind of funny because later I went to the store to do my grocery shopping, and there was a guy in the same aisle as me. I was not eavesdropping, but sometimes people talk a little loud on the phone. I love it when someone has someone on speaker and they're in an aisle at a store or something like that. That would be my husband. I'm always like, take it off speaker. People don't want to hear the other person. And he was talking very loud, but he was like, it was a rainy, dreary day or something like that. It got a little cold that day. We had like these glorious, beautiful days, and then all of a sudden we had these like, kind of gloomy days. And he was on the phone. He was like, it could be worse. We could be having a blizzard right now. It could be snowing. We could be trapped in our houses. Like he kept saying, he's like, so it's going to be fine. So there's a positive. And I was like, did this man listen to my podcast? I did not ask him that. Don't worry, or anything like that. But it was just like confirmation like, hey, you can find the positive. Find the little blessings and see what God name them. Name your blessings and see what God has done because he's always doing little things for us, you guys. So, yeah, I just had to share my little redo opportunity that God gave me. So, if you fail at something, just say, I want to redo God and see what he does. All right. To get into this week's topic, my husband was preaching recently. Well, he preaches all the time. It's not just like once in a while, but recently he was preaching, and often, a lot of times, like he'll say something and it'll spark a little thought in my mind. I jot it down in my book, kind of have all these jottings all over the place. They're not in one place. That would be too organized, you guys. But he he said so said something, it sparked an idea, and it was funny because this week he said, hey, what is the topic of your podcast? And I told him, I said, yeah, you said something in your message, and it was like this little, he just kind of mentioned it in passing kind of thing, but of course it just sparked this idea. And he goes, I said that? And I said, yeah, you said that. He goes, I don't remember saying that. And I'm like, you did. Because I wrote it down, actually. It's in my notes. Which, can I just say this? If you're not taking notes during service, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. I I find I retain the most in a message when I take notes. And actually, I found that with my daughter as well, like going to youth group, she has struggled to um just stay connected, and not because our youth pastor is not a good preacher, he is, but she's just, I don't know, I she goes off on tangents in her brain, but since she has started taking notes, she stays so focused. When she comes home from youth group, she's able to tell us everything that she learned. I actually love looking in her notebook at all of her notes because she does, she writes things down, and she'll be like, oh, and I wrote that down. So if you don't do that, do it, because you will find that you are so much more connected to what is happening. And even if it's not something you look at later, some people, they go back through the week, they look over your notes. I sit through two services, so it gets pretty ingrained in my mind what he preached on. But yeah, this last Sunday I was gone for a tournament, and I drove and listened to the message, and I felt so bummed that I couldn't write it down because I just know, for me, it just really helps. So if you struggle with connecting, and even if you don't struggle with connecting, just try it. Just see what happens. Get yourself a little notebook from Walmart or Target or wherever, and just jot things down and just see if that helps you retain things better. I love too, because I'll think of something like, oh, yeah, he said that in his message. Then I can go back and look because I jotted it down. Just a little plug. All of you pastors, you thank me, right? You can thank me for that. Have people more connected with what you're saying. Because listen, your pastor spends a lot of time putting that message together. I watch my husband. I know any message that I preach, even these podcasts, I put a lot of time and effort into it. And then for people, just for it to go in one ear and one out the other, it's like, huh, that's great. I just spent all that time. They're not even listening. So Do that. Do it for yourself more than your pastor, but your pastor will appreciate it. I think there's something too. I'm just going to keep going on this topic, even though it's not in my notes. That I think when I see people taking notes and I'm preaching, I don't know. I feel like, okay, they're retaining what I'm saying. It's landing. What I'm saying is landing. What Jesus is, we're trying to tap into Jesus. I'm not saying like pastors, it's all about them. Okay, just to clear that up. Anyways, so he said something, and this is what he said. He said, sometimes you need to cut the dead ends off. I'm just going to say it for the people in the back. Sometimes, okay, I didn't say all the times, but sometimes you need to cut the dead ends off. Now, maybe it was because I was getting a haircut in a few days. Love getting my hair done. It's my favorite thing because you don't have to do it. I can't wait till I'm old and you get to go to the salon every week and they like roll it, you know. I'm going to be a pudgy, rolly haired lady, old lady. I can't wait. It's going to be so great. It just be show up at my hair appointment the same time at the same day every week. You just fluff it out and then you're all good to go. You wear the little hairnet. So fun. Anyways, so I don't know if that sparked the thought, which I'll just say this little side. I have a lot of side. Maybe I should just call this podcast the side notes because that's apparently what's happening. So maybe you're like, okay, now I see why she takes notes because her brain is everywhere. My husband actually used my hair against me the other day in a little, not an argument, but a little banter back and forth. That's what we're gonna call it. Because we were taking a walk and he said something about getting a new hat or something like that. And I was thinking, well, Father's Day is coming up. The kids are always looking for, like, hey, what does dad want? What can we get dad? Because, you know, your kids get to a point where they can actually purchase a gift on their own. You don't have to purchase it for them. It's great. And so I said that, and he goes, well, some people get their hair and their nails done all the time. And some of us don't have hair. So we just have to get the things we can get. And I was like, did you just use the fact that I have hair and you do not against me? I don't think so. So that became a little. If you're wondering what our little, sorry, that was one of them. It wasn't a fight or anything like that, but I was like, I cannot believe he just went there with me. Okay, the nails, whatever, but I do like to get my nails done. It makes you feel pretty, you guys. But anyways, back to the hair. It's so Abby, when she was little, I think her hair changed a lot with puberty, but when she was younger, I could never understand why her hair didn't grow. It was always the same length, particularly on the sides of her face. It wouldn't grow very well. I mean, just no more than like I don't even know if it grew an inch. It would just be kind of bare on the whole sides of her head. She had hair in the back, but that even didn't grow very much. And one day I was watching the news and they were talking about this condition called uncombable hair. And they'd started to say what it was, and it can look different on different kids, but basically what it is that instead of a circular shaft, it's a triangular shaft. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's what she has. So I looked it up. I even said it to my hairdresser. I said, hey, do you think Abby has uncombable hair? And she goes, absolutely. I was like, why has this never been a discussion? Different hairdresser than I have now. And so, which we've talked about that, cheating on your hairdresser, all the fun stuff. But anyways, her hair was just very odd too. Like when we moved into the house we're in now, we live across from the pool. And so you can buy these passes, and she would go to the pool every single day, multiple times a day. Her sisters worked there. Sometimes they would pay them, like, we'll give you candy if you'll go home, because no kids were at the pool and they didn't want their siblings there. And I was like, I paid for that pass. You go right back over there to that pool. And now Abby's just applied for her first job at the pool. Crazy how your oldest kid worked there and now your youngest kid wants to work there. Time goes by fast, you guys. But anyways, she came home and I was brushing her hair and she had all these tiny knots in it. And I just thought, what, how on earth? I mean, and I couldn't tell like what kind of knots it was. I mean, it's just these little balls all over her hair. And I was like, what is going on? Something weird is happening here. And so I finally realized that the chlorine was eating her hair. And so it's causing these tiny little balls, because you know how it is at a pool. You got a bunch of teenagers who are just dumping in chlorine like it's nobody's business. And apparently, for Abby's hair type, as the kids like to say, they would tease her, you have a disease, Abby. It was so mean, not nice at all, but it was eating her hair. And so we had to do the whole cap thing, which she hated. But I was like, do you want the pool to keep eating your hair, or you can't go swimming? You got to choose one of the two. And so I ended up taking her to the hairdresser, and they had to cut. I mean, her hair already was not long by, I mean, it was short, but it was even shorter. And she was so upset because she had sisters and me. We all have long hair. Her hair would never grow. It would upset her so much. And every time after that, she would always be like, don't cut my hair. And she couldn't understand, because I would tell her, I'd say, Abby, we're just going to trim it. And when we trim it, it's going to make it healthier and it's going to grow. She could not wrap her brain around why we would possibly take hair off when we're trying to grow it. And that's a concept that I think that most of us struggle with. It's hard to think about cutting off the edges in order for things to grow. We all struggle, just like Abby did not get that concept until she was much older. And even now she's like, you take the smallest amount, because it's through a lot of nurturing and a lot of products and finding what works for her hair and all that stuff. But she's like, you take the smallest amount off. And I think she understands the concept now. But do we? Do we understand the concept that sometimes we have to trim things off in order for things to be healthy? Um, it's spring. Spring is here, and I have been assessing my yard because unfortunately we're not one of those people. So, like, we live in a cul-de-sac, I guess you would say, of older people, and all of their yards in the fall are all cleaned up, ready for the winter. So when spring comes, yes, they have some yard cleanup to do, but not at the level of which the Rollings have to do, because we have fall sports. We are busy in general, but I have to say that if it's laundry or lawn care, we pick laundry. Dishes, lawn care, we pick those dishes. So, there's leaves, there's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen in our yard. And so, but I've been assessing it and trying to figure out what I need to do. I did get a little bit of yard work done the other day, but when we lived at our old house, we had no landscaping. We had finally did like this border of rocks, and we were supposed to plant stuff in there, but that never happened. As I said, we picked other things over lawn care, but we came to this house. It had quite a bit of landscaping already done, so it was more of a maintenance thing. But because I've never had anything really, because, I don't have a green thumb, as we know. These plants are alive in the back of me. Actually, one of them is the other day, like 5 leaves fell off or something, like 4 or 5 leaves fell off. And I was like, uh-oh, it's dying. So I poured a bunch of water on it. We'll see what happens. If it's gone eventually, then you'll know that I killed it if you're watching the video. But so when I moved here, my friend who loves plants, she has like the app where you like put it on a plant and it tells you what it is. Because we'll be somewhere, she's like, oh, what is that? And she like whips out her phone, and I'm like, it's a plant. It's got life in it and it has a flower. That looks good. She's got to know what it is, what it does. Can she take a little snippet of it and grow it in her own yard? Yes, I'm telling on you, you know who you are. But she was like, Erin, we need to walk through all the things in your yard, because she knew I would kill everything. And there's things that need to be nurtured. Man, why is that a hard word to say? Nurtured. And I want to take in that word for just a second, because nurtured has a meaning, and it means the process of caring for and encouraging the growth or development of someone or something. Now, here's the thing with plants. You, in order to grow good things on your plants, you often have to be willing to cut or to trim things back in order to have them grow healthy. That's with plants. Let's move to people, because this also applies to the people in our lives. In order to have healthy relationships, sometimes we have to be willing to cut or trim those as well. Now, some of you are fine when it comes to thinking about trimming your plants or even trimming your hair. But people, that may feel a little extreme because it feels like now we're getting into murky waters. We're going to get into some deep things here, because it's maybe sounds extreme if you think about your relationships. Cutting someone off in your relationship, can I do that? Should I do that? Well, let's talk about it. When I was working on my yard and my friend had talked me through everything, my neighbor came over and we had some plants that were similar. And the next year that we were here, she was like, we have the same plant and yours is just, it's beautiful, it's luscious. And I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And she was like, you're such a good gardener. And I was like, oh, if you only knew. I said, well, I can't take the credit. My friend talked me through this. And she said, how did you get it to grow so well? And I said, well, my friend told me that I need to cut it. And she was like, oh, cut it that much? And I said, yeah, that much. And she's like, huh. I said, like, she told me you've got to cut it all the way here in order to have this kind of plant, for it to be this healthy and to grow like this. And so she kind of looked at me a little funny and she went home and I watched her. She trimmed her plants a little. And then when it was time for everything to bloom, they were better than they were the year before, but they didn't look like my plants. So we talked about it again. She goes, you said to trim that all the way, right? And I was like, yes. And she's like, yeah, I didn't do that last time because that just felt a bit extreme. And I said, yeah, I thought so too. I asked my friend, I was like, are you sure? And she was like, if you want a good, healthy plant, this is what you need to do. And she said, okay. And she went and then she did the extreme pruning of that plant. And guess what? Her flowers that year were glorious. They were beautiful. Extreme? The thing is, if you're not willing to clip things in your relationships, they will never produce anything good. And some of you are like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this, because it requires work on our part. Let's just be honest. You got to prune something. The other day I was like, oh no, it's like spring is coming. I haven't gotten out there, and I didn't have time, but I made time to get out there and prune it real quick, because I knew if I didn't, it wasn't going to produce anything healthy. So many people, I feel like, are in relationships that absolutely drain them. I have been in relationships that have literally sucked the life out of me. And it's hard when you're dealing with people, because you're like, I don't want to cut them off, but yet we know that we need to. But that is a very, very, I am not making this sound easy or just like, yeah, just go cut off all the bad relationships in your life and it's just gonna be easy peasy. No, it's very, very hard. I know I went through a time with a friend that I struggled, because it was like I knew I had to, but I didn't want to. And that just felt so harsh and difficult and overwhelming. It overwhelmed me. But here's the thing. If you don't cut off a diseased branch, what's going to happen? That diseased branch is going to begin to spread to the other branches. staying in an unhealthy relationship, that unhealthy relationship can start to spread to your healthy ones. That's why you got to take care of it. And all of your energy, this is another thing that she taught me about plants, is she said, if you don't cut this, that plant still sends all of this energy to this dead thing. And because you're not willing to cut it off, the good parts of the plant aren't getting what they need. So when you say, I'm not willing to cut that off, it means you're still sending all this energy into something that is not good. And the things that are good are not going to receive what it needs to be healthy. Are you trekking with me? Okay. Let's talk about a farmer, okay, who has to prune his trees. That's a big part of farming, like apple trees, let's just take for instance, or any like fruit tree like that. One time we did that. My mom did that for our pastor. Like we went and pruned things. I probably pruned things I shouldn't have. Those plants probably died. I should not have been given a pair of those cutting things, whatever those are. As you can tell, I don't know what they're called. Shears, no, clippers, maybe. I don't know. Is clippers for your hair? I don't know. Someone answer me. I need like a phone a friend when I'm doing this podcast, and I can't think of words. Okay, this is what a farmer does not do. He doesn't go into clip things and think to himself, oh no, I feel so bad that I have to clip these diseased branches or these branches that are dead. No, he's not walking up to the branch and saying, I'm so sorry, I need to cut you off. You're dead, but I'm so sorry I have to cut you off. No, why does he's not doing that. Why? Because he knows that by doing that, he's going to have this beautiful harvest in the end of it. So he's not second guessing himself. He's not saying, ooh, I'm so sorry, or ooh, go to cut it, and they're like, ooh, no, oh, go to cut it, ooh, no. No, he's like, hey, this needs to come off because I need to have a bountiful harvest. I read something that got me and kind of changed my perspective of it, and I guess I have thought of this, but not how it was worded when I read it, because I think sometimes in friendships or relationships, I'm not talking about marriages, just by the way, because when you say I do to a marriage, you said I do, okay? And we're not going to get into if it's abusive or all those things, but a normal marriage, you commit, you're committed for life, okay? But I'm talking about certain friendships or relationships with maybe even people in your family, okay? Because that's real life. But this is what it said. It said, when you have a relationship, it doesn't mean you are committed to continue it till the day you die. I just thought that, I was like, man, I wish I would have really thought of that. There was a relationship I had in my childhood that I struggled. I mean, it was just like, well, we've been friends since we were kids. Obviously, I have to have this for the rest of my life. And yet it was toxic for me. I don't know. Maybe it was toxic for them. I don't know. We've never talked about it. But I know for myself, it was so hard to prune that branch. It was so hard to say, this does not give me life. This is not going to harvest anything. It is unhealthy. It was so hard for me to cut it. But if I would have thought to myself, listen, there was a time maybe it was good. I don't even know if there was a time it was good. But sometimes in friendships or relationships, there's times that it's good for you. But then there's sometimes that it's not good for you. But we have this thinking like you've got to be in this forever. Like once you became friends, you've got to be friends forever. I've had enough rolling friendships that have gone through seasons. And that's what I would maybe say a little bit more that I've had the perspective of. Like there's just seasons for friendships. We're not locked down and loaded for eternity in friendships, because if that is our perspective, we will definitely stay in things that we should not stay in. And I think sometimes we need to look at those relationships and say, is this good for me? Is this healthy for me? Or is this relationship sucking the life out of me? And if the answer is yes to that, and you've gone to the person, maybe you've tried to fix those things, you've given it your best effort, but nothing is changing, I would say you probably need to do some pruning. I read a line that said, pruning isn't about our comfort as much as it is about our productivity. And I would agree with that. It's we stay in things because it's comfortable. Why do people stay in abusive situations? Because that's comfortable. That's what you know. And in order to change something, that is difficult. That takes work. Just like you have to prune something, it takes work on your part. You will have to put some effort into that. But being comfortable is not always the best place for us. I don't actually think that's where we grow or mature or become more like Jesus if you stay in this place of comfort. But if we look at things and say, is this producing things in me, like good things? My husband talks about this all the time about adding value. It was in his last message. I would say it's one of his lines that he says a lot in his messages, and he could say it a gazillion more times and it would still land in on me and in my heart and in my mind the same way as the first time he said it, because I think of that all the time. Am I adding value? I even asked him when I got home. I said, am I this kind of person when people see me coming? Am I sucking the life out of people, or am I adding value to them? And good question for us all to ask, and something I need to continue to ask, because I can be a little hard. I see things that I don't want to see that can be critical or whatever, but I want my presence to be far more giving to people than taking away from people. And if I'm taking away from people, then maybe you need to cut me out. I would say that, because I'm not adding value to you. Are the people around you, the people you are giving your energy to, are they adding value to you? And if they're not, whew, you need to look at that. I currently have two friends, and both of their situations, they were talking to me in the last 2 weeks as this podcast was marinating. So my one friend, the relationship was with her mother. Okay, so these are actually both parent ones. They're not even friend ones, but it's with her mother, and she has given and given and tried to change the relationship. And I've watched her. I've been on the journey with her, and the amount of sacrifice she's done to try to get to this place with her where it's like it's healthy, and she walks away feeling like, okay, I added life to her, she added life to me, and she just has not been able to get to that place. And she's in this place of like, what do I do? Because yes, it seems extreme to cut your mother out of your life, right? But here's the thing, is it adding value to you? Is all of the energy she's giving, is it going to something that is going to produce something? And I think she's in a place where she's like, it's not. And that is a very, very difficult place to be. But she realized that the more, when she distanced herself, she didn't feel like, when you go around someone and you just walk away and you just feel like all of the life was sucked out of you. That, my friend, is a red flag saying this isn't good for you. Extreme, yes, but we're going to get into, because we're going to get a little biblical here, okay? Another friend, she, with her dad, struggling, and has really, really distanced herself, but realized that maybe she could just do some pruning on some things, cutting back a little bit, not the whole thing, but pruning here and there. And then just had an amazing conversation with him and realized that they really can move forward in a much healthier way through conversation. It was like she felt like it gave her so much life having this last conversation with him and all these things. And she's like, I think, yes, there's more things that need to be pruned, but we're going to be able to grow. Two different kinds of relationships with two different outcomes. Some you can just prune and it's going to grow. And some it's like, this is not, this is a diseased relationship. Oof. I know this sounds so harsh, right? It sounds so extreme, but think about it. There are people in your life that are causing the disease and it will spread. And here's something else. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself or not. Um, because maybe, well, we'll go into the biblical part because some of you are going, Aaron is going too far. And Aaron is not sounding like a Christian. Maybe you're thinking that. Well, just stick with me because there is a passage in John 15, 1, verses 1. No, John, yeah, verses 1 and 2. I'll get it. And it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vineyard keeper. And every branch in me that does not produce, he removes. Did you hear that? Every vine that does not produce, he removes. And he prunes. So he removes and he prunes. You got, ooh, that rhymes. He removes and he prunes every branch that produces fruit. So even the ones that are healthy need some pruning so that it will produce more fruit. Pruning is biblical. Cutting out is biblical, you guys. God himself cuts out and he prunes. He does both. Why? Why would he prune? Why would he cut out? Because just like the farmer who knows that when he does that, it's going to yield something good, God says, when you do that, because it's going to produce something good because God values fruitfulness. He desires fruitfulness in your life. That's important to him. You cannot have good fruit without pruning. And that you are going to have to be intentional. Then this is maybe not going to be fun. About cutting people out that are not producing fruit in your life. And if you're not convinced, let me put it this way, because this was like ba-boom to me. Think about this. When you walk away from a relationship that is not causing fruitfulness in you, okay? It frees you up to walk into relationships that do cause fruit, that do cause you to grow. But when you stay in relationships that suck you dry, that are causing death or disease in you, you cannot walk into the relationships that are healthy because that disease will follow you. Just like a branch on a tree, when it has disease, it spreads to the rest of the plant. That's why you got to take care of it. And that's why in relationships, you're going to have to take care of it if you want to be able to walk into other relationships. I will tell you this from experiences. What I'm saying is 1,000% true, because I know when I started to discard things that were very, very painful because they were, I get emotional, relationships that I loved. I loved these people, but I realized they were not healthy. And even though we tried to fix things and we tried to work through it, it wasn't healthy. So there was a point where I was like, I need to be done with this. And guess what happened? It freed me to be in the relationships and in the friendships that I'm in today, which are the best friendships of my life. I can honestly say I have amazing friends who give so much life. But if I wasn't willing to cut off that branch, I could never walk fully into the relationships I'm in now. And I can tell you from personal experience, I'm not telling you something that I haven't walked through myself. And I understand how difficult it is. I understand how hard it is. But I also know that there's a life on the other side of being willing to cut off the things that are sucking the life out of you, that are not bringing any life, that are not adding any value to you. I can tell you from experience. You and I were called to bear fruit. It is a calling. John 15:16 says, I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, and not just fruit, but fruit that will last. You're called to bear fruit. I'm called to bear fruit. So that means we have to look at ourselves. All right, this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Take a step back, look at yourself and say, am I bearing the fruit that the Lord has called me to bear? And is it good fruit? Because some trees bear some fruit, but it's nasty. It's gross. You can't eat it because it wasn't pruned. It should have never even got to that point, but somebody didn't take care of that branch. Now, like I said, don't go crazy and start just like hacking off branches all over the place, but I would encourage you to pray about your friendships or your relationships and say, when I need to be around this person, do I dread it? When I'm around them, do they drain me? Are they helping me bear good fruit? Or is the fruit that I'm bearing, is it dead? Is it diseased? Is it holding me back from good relationships? You guys pray and evaluate. But just so you know, you might need to cut some things out. You might need to do some pruning. And even on your good relationships, prune so you produce better fruit. I have the kind of relationship with my friends where we're very open and we're very honest, and I love it because sometimes you got to do some little pruning. I recently asked a good friend of mine, I was like, hey, am I like this? And I asked her a question, and she was like, and I was willing for her to do a little pruning because, you know, that verse, iron sharpens iron. And she was like, do I do this? And we just had this great open conversation. We were both willing to hear if we needed to cut some things. Same with my husband. I asked him, I was like, hey, am I this kind of person? Am I this kind of person? I'm willing to hear it because I'm willing to be pruned. But are you willing to go in your relationships, dive into them, ask yourself those questions, and say, is this producing good fruit? And just so you know, I've been there, I've done it, and you can do it. And you will be so thankful you did because it'll allow you to walk into just amazing relationships, healthy, amazing, fruit-bearing, good fruit-bearing relationships. And here's the thing, if Jesus talks about it, then we want to pay attention and we want to go do it. So go do it.